Hey guys, I want to do a video today and look at the book of Revelation. And the book of Revelation is definitely a symbolic book, but I want to look at the first verse and talk about the word signified, because I think a lot of pastors and teachers of eschatology use this word to over spiritualize the book of Revelation. Let's read Revelation 1:1. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave unto him to show unto his servants things which must shortly come to pass. And he sent and signified it by his angel unto his servant John. So if you look at this slide, this is what a lot of churches teach, that it tells us right in the very first verse that Revelation is a book of symbols and sign language and this apocalyptic language, and you can't take it literally at all. And we'll use this verse saying it says it right in the very first verse to take everything symbolically. And like I said, there is symbology in the book of Revelation. We see, for instance, in Revelation 12, the woman that's clothed with the sun and the seven-headed dragon. Obviously, this isn't a literal woman, and this isn't a literal seven-headed dragon. But the Bible tells you what these things are throughout its verses. For instance, after the seven-headed dragon is introduced in Revelation 12:9, it says, "And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceives the whole world." So obviously, the seven-headed dragon was Satan. And then we have the woman that was arrayed in purple and scarlet riding a seven-headed beast. We know this isn't a literal seven-headed beast. And this woman was representative of the unbelieving remnant of Israel within Jerusalem, where their leaders were. And it says exactly what the harlot was. Revelation 17:18, "And the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth." So we have symbology of the woman that was dressed in white. This was righteous remnant of Israel who read the book of Revelation, heard the words, and was blessed by following what it said. When Jesus said, "When you see the abomination of desolation, flee to the mountains." When they saw the abomination of desolation, the woman in white fled to the wilderness and was protected for 1260 days. This was the believing faction of Israel. The woman that was arrayed in purple and scarlet riding the seven-headed beast did not follow Christ, but was in allegiance with the Roman Empire. And that woman that made up Mystery Babylon the Great with the Roman Empire was destroyed at the revelation of Jesus Christ and his second coming. So just because something says that it's signified doesn't mean that you can over spiritualize the entirety of the book of Revelation. And so, as I've talked about often, when you read the Bible, the King James Bible is its own dictionary, is its own source. If you want to know what a word means within the context of the Bible, then look at every time it's used. And so with that said, let's look at the word signified and signify and look at what the Bible uses it as. So, but when you over spiritualize, the puzzle pieces, like we've been talking about, don't go together. But don't underestimate the power of trying to put puzzle pieces together where they don't fit, because you can make the Bible say anything that you want to, just about, especially if you over spiritualize it. And that's where a lot of bad eschatology comes into play within the church today. So let's look at the word signify. And let's start in Acts 11:28. "And there stood up one of them named Agabus, and signified by the Spirit that there should be great dearth throughout all the world, which came to pass in the days of Claudius Caesar." So in context, it was talking about a great famine that was to come. And in these days came prophets from Jerusalem unto Antioch. And then Agabus signified by the Spirit that there should be great dearth throughout all the world. So he declared or made evident, he indicated by the Spirit that there was going to be a future famine. The word signified here doesn't mean to take the book of Acts symbolically. It simply means to declare or make evident. The next time we see it is in Acts 21:26. Then Paul took the men, and the next day, and these are the 4 men that go into the temple, the Gentiles, and there was big commotion about this event that Paul brought them into the outer court of the temple. But it says, then Paul took the men, and the next day, purifying himself with them, entered into the temple to signify the accomplishment of the days of purification, until that an offering should be offered for every one of them. So to signify the accomplishment of the days of purification simply meant to make evident of or to indicate. We're not talking about anything to make the book of Acts read as symbols. In Acts 23:15, now therefore ye with the council signify to the chief captain that he bring him down unto you tomorrow, as though he would inquire something more perfectly concerning him, and we, or ever he come near, are ready to kill him. So this is when the Jews sent to try to get the council and the chief captains to bring Paul down, because there was a group of men that said they weren't going to eat again. They were fasting until he was dead, till they killed him. And so they told him to go to the council and signify to the chief captain that he bring him down. He was indicating to the chief captain that he bring him down. He's like, this is what I want you to do. You know, this is what I want to make evident of. In Acts 25:27, for it seemeth to me unreasonable to send a prisoner, and not withal to signify the crimes laid against him. And again, we can look at context of this when Festus and King Agrippa were discussing Paul and the crimes and charges that were brought to his account. That it says again, if you go back to the verse, it seems unreasonable to send a prisoner, and not withal to signify the crimes laid against him, to make evident of, to declare, to make known the crimes laid against him. This isn't talking about reading anything symbolically. In 1 Peter 1:11, it reads, searching what manner of time the Spirit of Christ, which was in them, did signify, when it testified beforehand the sufferings of Christ and the glory that should follow. So again, in this context, signify means to indicate or to declare, to make known. And then when Jesus is indicating through different signs what manner he was to die, it says the word signify several times in the book of John. For instance, in John 12:32, and I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men to me. This he said, signifying what death he should die. So he's showing that he was to be lifted up, and Jesus talked about that a lot. That was indicating what type of death he was going to suffer. In John 18:31, then said Pilate unto them, take ye him and judge him according to your law. The Jews therefore said unto him, it is not lawful for us to put any man to death, that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spake, signifying what death he should die. So the Jews did not put Jesus to death. They coerced the Roman Empire into putting him to death. And the manner of the death sentence in the Roman Empire was crucifixion. So that was signifying, with Jesus being lifted up, what type of death that he was to have at the hands of the Roman Empire. And in John 21:18, Jesus says to Peter, verily, verily, I say unto thee, when thou wast young, thou girdest thyself and walkest whither thou wouldest. But when thou shalt be old, thou shalt stretch forth thy hands, and another shall gird thee and carry thee whither thou wouldest not. This spake he, signifying by what death he should glorify God. And when he had spoken this, he said unto him, follow me. So again, this is Jesus speaking to Peter, and he is indicating what type of death that Peter was going to suffer. Again, crucifixion. In Hebrews 9:8, the Holy Ghost, this signifying that the way into the holiest of all was not yet made manifest, while as the first tabernacle was yet standing. So in this context, again, it is something that is being indicated, being made known. In Hebrews 12:25 through 27, it reads, "See that you refuse not him that speaketh, for if they escape not who refused him that spake on earth, much more shall not we escape if we turn away from him that speaketh from heaven, whose voice then shook the earth. But now he hath promised, saying, Yet once more I shake not the earth only, but also heaven. And this word, yet once more, signifieth the removing of those things that are shaking, as of things that are made, that those things which cannot be shaken may remain." This is talking about Jesus' second coming and the changing of the heavens and earth that were going to occur at that time, at the powerful voice, as we see in the book of Revelation, especially in the seventh trumpet and vial. There were voices and lightnings and thunders. We see this, but it signified, it indicated the removing of those things that are shaken. So again, the book of Revelation does have symbols. It is a symbolic book, I agree, but you can't use the first verse and say everything in it is symbolic, because then you have free reign to do whatever you want with the Bible and prophecy, and it can get, again, into bad eschatology. And so let me show you just a couple of examples. Revelation 4:1. "After this I looked, and behold, a door was opened in heaven, and the first voice which I heard was as it were of a trumpet talking with me, which said, Come up hither, and I will show thee things which must be hereafter. And immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne was set in heaven, and one sat on the throne." So this is simply John being caught up in the Spirit to see the spiritual that Jesus is relating to him of the things that were imminent, that were to be coming upon that generation. But you get people in the church, especially the rapture crew, and they will use those words of John and say, "Oh, that's symbolic of the rapture," and then say that's symbolic of the rapture of the church, and use Revelation 4:1 and 2 to teach a rapture doctrine for a future generation. The fifth trumpet. When you look at the fifth trumpet, I agree, it is a very weird verse and passage in chapter 9, the fifth trumpet with the locust. And it describes the locust in Revelation 9. And the shapes, and this is John describing what he saw. "And the shapes of the locusts were like unto horses prepared unto battle, and on their heads were as it were crowns like gold, and their faces were as the faces of men. And they had hair as the hair of women, and their teeth were as the teeth of lions, and they had breastplates as it were breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was as the sound of chariots and many horses running to battle. And they had tails like unto scorpions, and there were stings in their tails, and their power was to hurt men 5 months." So this is a very weird creature that John is describing, and I would agree with that. But like I mentioned in a previous video when talking about the fifth trumpet, this is what John saw, and this is a real creature, a spiritual being that I believe John was seeing. And these were spiritual beings that carried out that fifth trumpet judgment. Now, the people, the mortals that were on earth that were being tormented for 5 months by these spiritual creatures, I'm sure could not see them in their fleshly glasses. But John, in the Spirit, was given a vision of what these creatures actually look like. And as I mentioned, it's like Elisha when he was showing his servant of when they were going to battle and they were compassed by armies of horses and chariots. And Elisha's like, let me show you who's on our side. And in 2 Kings 6:17, and Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mount was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. So this is real. Those are real horses and real chariots, fire, real armies that Elisha and his servant saw that were protecting them. In the same fashion, these are real creatures that John saw that were bringing about judgment during the fifth trumpet. But if you go to the churches today, here's what the appearance of the locusts are, and they will teach this futurist doctrine. The faces like human faces were the helicopter pilots, and the women with long hair were the whirling helicopter blades, and the teeth like lions' teeth are an armament of tanks and helicopters, and the breastplates of iron represent the tanks and helicopters. This is very bad interpretation, but this is what happens when you over-spiritualize the book of Revelation. But this is probably more what John saw and not a tank or a helicopter. The seventh trumpet sounds, and you have a megaquake. The seventh vial being poured out that we see in Revelation 16, verses 17 through 19. And the seventh angel poured out his bowl into the air, and there was lightning and rumblings, peals of thunder, and a great earthquake, such as there had never been since man was on the earth. So great was that earthquake. The great city was split into 3 parts, and the cities of the nation fell. So this was the greatest earthquake, unlike any other in the history of the world. And it says the great city was split into 3 parts. We know that great city was Jerusalem. And people say, well, this is just symbolic, or, oh, it was a small earthquake, and, and it's yet to come, and we're looking at the Middle East right now, Jerusalem, and, after this tribulation, one day they may have an earthquake, and the roads and buildings may collapse and split. And they equate, an earthquake, something like we've experienced in our recent past in different areas of the world. But no, this was a megaquake, the biggest earthquake ever. And it did serious damage, like we talked about in another video I did called Mystery Babylon, where this not only split Jerusalem in 3 parts, but most likely is evidence of what we see our world today, the new heavens and new earth that came out of the devastating cataclysmic judgments at the time of the second coming of Jesus Christ. The continental drift theory that evolutionists will say happened over millions and millions of years. They have a lot of good evidence. They have a lot of good evidence if you look at rock strata and different fossilization records. But it didn't happen over millions and millions of years like they said. It happened, and we see it in the Bible how it happened. And like I said, Jerusalem split into 3 parts. Now maybe 3 parts of that former biblical city in the midst of the earth now being separated on different continents. And finally, the millennial reign of Jesus Christ, the 1,000-year reign. Is the millennium literal or figurative? Well, we go to Revelation 20 and read the first 7 verses. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. That's the first mention of 1,000 years. And cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that, he must be loosed a little season. That's twice. And I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. Another mention. But the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. Another mention of 1,000 years and all the events that are going on in and around this time period. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death hath no power, but they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. That's the fifth time. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. So in verses 2 through 7 of Revelation 20, in 5 verses, it mentions 1,000 years 6 times. But you have churches today that teach this is not literally 1,000 years, it's figurative. But if you go to that same church and they talk about the 3.5 years that's mentioned 5 times in the book of Revelation, they'll say, oh yeah, of course that's literally 3.5 years. And they describe it in different ways. 42 months, 1,260 days, times, and half times. And we see this over the course of 3 chapters that it's mentioned 5 times. Well, we see in 5 verses in Revelation 20, 1,000 years mentioned 6 times. But yet there's some teachers of eschatology that want to teach that this is not literal. But yet they take an amount of time that's mentioned 5 times in the book of Revelation and say it is literal. This 1,000 years. And we see it not only in the Bible, but we see it in our historical record. The 1,000-year dark ages was truly an age of light. This was the millennial reign of Christ. We see it not only through the false historical narrative of the dark ages that tries to hide it, but we see it hidden within the Byzantine Empire. This 1,000-year period after the fall of Rome, where this empire that we never hear about in our history classes growing up in school, that this 1,000-year empire began. And with it, you see symbology of saints, glorified saints with halos, angelic beings, and a ruling empire that is Christian and lasted 1,000 years. This is the millennial kingdom. This is a literal 1,000 years, and it's already occurred in our past. But we have full preterism that looks at the millennium as symbolic and changes 1,000 into 40. And there's no other passage that even would suggest that you can do that. And then you have partial preterism, which looks at it also as symbolically, and that it's this unknown time that is going and going since either the Pentecost or since 70 AD at the time of the judgments, and that we're in this time period still where Satan is bound, the symbolic millennial time that's been going on, if you believe our historical record of our chronology, is going on for 2,000 years plus now. And amillennialism, which simply means there's no millennium. And again, it takes it symbolically. And again, partial preterists, amillennialists are kind of in the same camp. And then postmillennial, where amillennial thinks that the time period, this time period unknown until the second coming of Jesus Christ, thinks we're going to get worse and worse. Postmillennialists think it's going to get better and better until the second coming of Jesus Christ. But the amillennial means there's no millennium. Postmillennial means that the second coming of Jesus Christ happens after the millennium. And you can see here the postmillennial. But again, all these eschatology viewpoints are using spiritual duct tape to try to put pieces together that don't fit, but they're making a whole teaching on eschatology because they're not taking the Bible at its word. Premillennialism at least takes the Bible at its word when it comes to the millennial reign. They look at it as a literal 1,000-year time period, and it happens after the second coming of Jesus Christ. So it's premillennial, being that Jesus Christ comes before the 1,000-year reign. And from a time standpoint, this is good teaching. It's just the fact that premillennialists can't see that the second coming's already happened and that the millennial kingdom has already occurred, and we're further down the biblical prophetic timeline than what they teach. So getting back to Revelation 1:1, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave unto him to show unto his servants things which must shortly come to pass, and he sent and signified it by his angel unto his servant John. The word signified in Revelation 1:1 simply means to indicate or to make known. It doesn't mean to take the entire book of Revelation symbolically. Because if you do and begin to over-spiritualize things that you shouldn't in prophecy, then this is when the puzzle pieces don't fit. And that duct tape that you've been using, the spiritual duct tape, doesn't fix your eschatology. So with that, we'll do another video soon. God bless.